Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Today, I would like to talk to you all about change. In relation to why did I choose the topic of change for the session today, it really wasn't difficult for me to make a decision around this and choose my topic. And why is that? So I guess currently today, humanity, the world, ourselves, our communities, our families, our work colleagues, we are all obviously experiencing exponential change at the moment, like that we have never, ever experienced before, as a result, of course, of the pandemic we're currently dealing with. As a result of that, we are having to receive change, we are having to make change, and we're having to manage the impacts of what we are both receiving and making in order to, I guess, live a healthy, balanced, productive and successful life alongside this situation that we face together globally. And as a result of that, those changes that we need to make need to be positive changes for every single one of us. Also, change is what I have done professionally now for nearly 20 years, which gives you a bit of a clue that I'm at now the wrong end of the day, my 40s, basically. I've been doing it for a really, really long time. So just to give you a little bit more information about my background, in addition to what Gemma shared with you. So I've worked in financial services for 20 years plus. I started work in the financial derivatives sector in the open outcry environment for the derivatives market. Open outcry, for those of you that may not be aware of what that is because they don't exist anymore, were the trading pits in what some people would commonly term as the stock exchange that were very, very, very male-dominated, minimal female presence, not much inclusion at that point in time. But glad to say over time that obviously changed as the world changed around us and diversity became more and more important. As I came out of that environment, I moved into operations, where I was responsible for the settlement of transactions for our fixed income customers in the investment banking arm. And as a leader of those teams, before we had change management teams, they didn't even exist. I was responsible really for leading out on projects to deliver any change that was happening, either from a process perspective, either from a organizational perspective or a technology perspective. We kind of really did it side of desk back in those days. At that point in time, I became fascinated by change. I became fascinated by the psychology of it. I became fascinated by the science of it. And I effectively decided to become a student of change throughout my career. And I guess there's no better place to talk about change than here at Blue Prism, of course, where you're making significant change and have been since you were founded via the digitization of the global workforce, using robotic process automation. As Gemma mentioned, I started my journey in relation to RPA in July 2017, supporting Brian Halpin when he was the head of automation at HSBC. I came in as the program manager alongside Lee Edwards at Smart Automation Service, who is one of your Blue Prism partners, to build out that internal capability within HSBC. And I understand as well, talking about Blue Prism, you've made significant change beyond creating the workforce. When you first started out, I think it's 2001, I believe, that Blue Prism began their journey to implement RPA and build out those processes for organizations to utilize. I think it was the first company to actually coin the phrase RPA, as I understand it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So again, making a significant change to what the workplace looked like going forward. So before we go forward, there's a question I've got for you, actually, if that's okay. So if you can use your chat box. So could you all just give me one word that you think of what springs to mind when you consider change? What does it represent to you? What does it mean to you? It doesn't come clear, does it? It doesn't come immediately to your mind necessarily. It's such a broad term. It can mean so many things. And that's really good. We're getting some really positive ones, because somebody also said excitement. And that's really positive to see somebody using that word when they consider change. That's good to see. I mean, when I was preparing for this presentation, I found 10, I think it was 10 definitions of change. I know we obviously have a vast array of dictionaries these days that we can utilize when we're looking up these things, but 10 definitions. There were 42 synonyms as well for change. When you type in change, 42 synonyms are returned to you. So what does this tell us? What it tells us is that change means a multitude of things to different people, different things to different people. It invokes very, very different responses, reactions, and emotions. But the one thing I can tell you from my experience, from both a workplace perspective and just my life experience, of course, is that the one consistent is that change is constant, and that we by design, as a result, are change. And it's often complex. So what I'd like to talk to you about now is really how you can be part of delivering positive change and what it is that you can do to make a difference. So going back, about 18 years ago now, I worked for a bank called ABN AMRO. They no longer exist. They were bought out by the Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, a good 10 plus years ago now. RBS, who are now commonly known as NatWest, since they changed their name last year. I'd started off in my change management journey at this point. We just started to form change teams, as an actual thing that existed, rather than managing change alongside a desk of our day jobs. And I was deemed to be relatively good at change. I managed projects well, to time, to plan, to cost. And I had a pretty solid reputation, I guess, of doing it well. Now, at this time, I was asked to lead out an initiative called Marco Polo. And Marco Polo was an offshoring initiative. And this is back when you really started to see the financial services industry beginning to offshore their processes, their operations processes, out to locations such as India. We used Chennai and Hyderabad at the time. Now, I also I was doing this for a lending product. It was a lending division that I was looking to offshore. It was their processes, it was their teams. And I had experience of lending from when I was in the operations space myself. So given that I had that knowledge, given that I considered that I did change quite well, and I delivered projects well, and I thought I was pretty good at it, I kind of went off down my own path and defined a target operating model for that offshoring initiative, very much driven on a low cost principle. So my main objective, and what I understood the main objective of the bank and the senior stakeholders and the sponsors for this, was to reduce as much cost as possible. And that was what I focused in on. So I defined that operating model and the plan to deliver that very much based on my ideas of what they were seeking to achieve. Now, when I came into the room to present my proposal around that target operating model with the analysts that have worked with me, with my small project management team, it became apparent pretty quickly that I hadn't hit the sweet spot, that my idea of what they were looking to achieve in year one versus their plans and their objectives and the outcomes they were looking to see achieved via this initiative were way off the mark, were disproportionate to each other, were literally going in separate directions. They were very much focused on the fact that this was a significant change for the bank. It was the first time we was going to offshore processes, okay? So it was a significant impact to our customers, who would now have to dealing with different teams, different people, different processes, maybe slightly more inexperienced people, of course. Our people, this meant that roles were going to be shut down in the UK, obviously. huge impact to the workforce on a emotional level, and also culturally, because the cultural working practices were very different, and that was something that we was going to have to get used to. So their focus was, yes, of course, on cost. They had to get cost out. They had targets, but their focus was primarily around ensuring we did all of these things, considering those three aspects. Bottom line, they challenged me hard. I failed. It was a disaster, and I had to start from scratch. And it was an awful experience. And I really failed fast. And there was a lot to be learned from that experience. So at that time, I had a mentor, and he was a change leader. And I shared the experience with him and said it was one I never wanted to repeat again, basically. And basically what he taught me was a framework that he'd utilized in his career as a change leader that you can leverage to manage change effectively. And this can be used both when you're delivering change, whatever that change might be, in your day-to-day work, but also, of course, in your home life. And as you take on your own piece of change that you're responsible for, whatever that might be, it will guide you, this framework will guide you in how to make and deliver positive change. And that starts with awareness. Awareness is absolutely critical. Awareness of your environment, the people around you, the challenges, the problems you might face, the potential blockers, the cultures, it's endless. Awareness of the environment around you when you're delivering change is absolutely critical. So you need to focus on awareness of these things. Yourself, very importantly, how you're engaging with people, how you're perceived, how you are articulating your understanding of what you're being asked to set out to do. Awareness of other people, what it means to them, how they're responding to that. Awareness of the situation, what it is you're actually looking to deliver and why, and your broader environment. In change management, we rely heavily on facts. We are constantly compiling business cases, undertaking cost-benefit analysis, producing documents. And these are all really, really important as they validate, their role is to validate that the change you're making is absolutely the right thing to do. People, however, they will take a little longer to bring on the journey. When you're delivering change, whatever that might be, you need to focus as much, if not more, on the people that are involved and you are taking on that journey with you. And what do I mean by that? Consider nonverbal behavior. Look at people's face, their expressions, their hands, their posture, their body language, effectively. We are obviously operating a lot via audio right now, just like we are today. Try and identify people's word choices, the tone of voice. They're all really, really important clues. And these will really help you to be fully aware at the start of your change journey. Relating this to my experience of delivering RPA, when I started in HSBC with Brian in July of 2017, other than a couple of areas where Brian had already taken the RPA through to a point where this was being implemented, he'd advocated it, evangelized it. He really set the standard, as I'm sure you know there, of taking that journey forward in HSBC. But there was obviously still many, many areas that were very, very green and were really not aware of RPA and what it meant and what the benefits of it were, and focused very much on the kind of negatives, right? So it was important that we made ourselves aware of these, I guess, myths and misconceptions so that we could help these individuals that were going to have to start to work with RPA in their life and bring that into their teams and, deal with that change, because it's a significant change, of course, back then, and help them break through those myths and misconceptions to help them feel more comfortable and to really see the benefits. And, without the awareness of what those things were, we would have just charged ahead and failed at delivering the implementation of those processes. Awareness in itself will generate lots of information. And to process and absorb and assess that information, you will need a tool to sort through that. And in this framework, that tool is called holistic decisioning. Holistic decisioning, considering a whole thing or being to be more than a collection of the parts. So what does that mean? What that means is using your brain, but also your heart and your gut together to reach the best decisions. The US military did some research that I find absolutely fascinating, but not entirely surprising, I guess. If you only use your brain, your frontal cortex only to make decisions, they established that you'll get it right approximately 70% of the time. Not a great number if you're a soldier in the field, right? You'd like that number to be higher. For greater success, you really need to also listen to your heart and your gut. The heart communicates with the brain electromagnetically, and some sensitive scientific testing that was undertaken through the military studies has proven that we can pick up signals from the heart from 6 to 8 feet away. So if we was all in a physical location together today, in a room, we would be able to communicate. This tells us we would be able to communicate heart signals from the heart. We would be able to communicate with the people around us, which is really quite fascinating. Also, science has established that the gut has thinking cells, the same type of cells that exist in the frontal cortex. And studies are showing that a whole lot of information is actually stored in the gut through these cells. Really, really fascinating stuff. I always decision this way. I never solely use my brain. I'm empathetic, so I use my heart. And I trust my gut. And as time moves on, I trust my gut and my instinct more and more often. But you can't make decisions by any of those in isolation. You really have to consider them all as a collective. What does a holistic decision look like then? What do I mean by this? How would you potentially experience this? How would you feel it? How would you know that you're making a holistic decision? Think about a fork in the road. Let's say you're delivering a piece of change at work, and you know you've got two options of how you might deliver that change, how you might implement that, how you might make that come to be. So the path to the left, option one, you feel a little anxious about it. You have a tightness in your gut. Just something, you're just not quite sure. You're not convinced, right? And you can feel that. The path to the right, option two, you're less anxious. You feel calm about it. You feel collected about it. Something feels right. It feels right. And that is how you make a holistic decision. You consider all of those three components: your brain, your heart, and your gut. So you have awareness. You have made some holistic decisions based on the information that you've processed through creating that awareness. And you now need followers to support you and to go on the journey with you to deliver that change. And you achieve this through clear communication. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm just going to ask for a volunteer right now, if that's okay. Is that Sophie? Would that be okay?
Yep, happy, Kerry.
Yeah, you just popped up, so thank you for that. Right, so let's all pretend we are living in the old world and we are all in a seminar environment, and we're all going to celebrate Inclusion Week after this because it's been such a great week. So Sophie, I'm volunteering you to have organise some drinks back at your house for the team to go back, right, after the day. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. So basically, obviously, I'm going to take responsibility, given that I've volunteered you for this, to make sure people know how to get to your house. So there's three ways, I guess, that we can do that, right? I can communicate the directions to everyone via email, I can communicate via map, or I can talk you through it. So a question to you all: what would you prefer? what would be your preference? If you people want to put that on the chat box, if I was going to give you directions to get to Sophie's house, how would you prefer that I gave that to you?
I think I'd quite like to be asked in person, actually. I'm a bit old-fashioned like that. Ooh,
yeah, me too.
Someone's put email.
Someone's put email. Good, nice written,
Yep.
Clear communication. Anyone? Oh, and we have a map. So we have a visual person in the audience. So that's good, right? So Google Maps, good old Google Maps. It never works for me, but I'm glad it does for other people. Okay, that's brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you. So, okay, so we have written in an email, we have a Google map, and we have old-fashioned style, talk you through it. Who is right? What is the best method of communication across the three? Do we think there's one that stands out that's better than the rest? No. Okay, that's good. That's the right answer because they're all right. Okay? All of them are correct. People process information different ways. People like to be communicated to in different ways. So as a change leader, do I need to do all three? Do I need to potentially send an email to someone? Do I need to share a map? Do I need to talk them through it? Absolutely, yes, I do. And you will find that commonly you are going to have to constantly use different methods of communication depending on who's receiving it. HSBC, massive organisation, right? When I was delivering RPA there, multiple divisions, multiple locations, multiple working cultures, competing priorities, diverse cultures, diverse needs. People needed different things from me. And obviously it's my role as a change leader to make sure I can communicate to them in a way that's clear and is understood. Now, one thing I can tell you about change from my experience, which is an absolute certain, it's never in a straight line. Things never remain the same. And you must be able, as a change leader, you must be able to adapt. So just before we get into this slide, and thank you for my time check, ladies, appreciate that. I just want you to take a little look at the octopus on the image. So I think the octopus has recently become my favorite creature. I've fallen in love with it. It is an extremely adaptable creature. The reason I've fallen in love with it, I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to see a program called My Octopus Teacher, a documentary film that was that's on Netflix right now. Has anyone seen that? We'll pop it in the chat if you have. I just want to say it's probably one of the most moving and amazing documentary films I've seen in a very, very long time, and very uplifting given the times we're experiencing right now. It really put a smile on my face. So just a tip there for you. If you want to see you want some good watching at the weekend that's going to really lift your spirits, please take a look at that. Okay, so adaptability. I'm going to give you a couple of experiences from my career where I really needed to adapt and at pace. At the Royal Bank of Scotland, I was responsible for leading out a bank-wide customer onboarding transformation program. So, and the bank-wide aspect is what's all important here in this example. For an organisation, for a bank that has multiple divisions that are very siloed, it's very difficult to achieve something bank-wide where we're all working together, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, to achieve the same outcomes for our customers. It takes a certain type of individual and sponsor to be able to make that happen. I had a sponsor at the start. The sponsor had competing, I guess, priorities. Doing things in a bank-wide way would actually inhibit and impact his own objectives within the commercial banking arm, and mean that was going to make his core role difficult as the COO to achieve those things, whilst also focusing on a bank-wide initiative. So if you don't have true active sponsorship on a change initiative, you're going to fail. So what did I do? I identified that this was causing us a problem, and using my network, I sought out an alternative sponsor that could help us get this program over the line. And so, yes, I found a new sponsor. So I changed out the sponsor, obviously not alone. Obviously, there was lots of conversations and stakeholder influence that took play to make that happen. So my new sponsor came in, we started again, and it became clear that he just had too much work on, right? His workload was just too heavy. It just was not going to happen. It's just not going to work. So again, I had to change my sponsor. Again, I had to go out to my network. Again, I had to influence stakeholders and see who might be the best person for the job. And then I found sponsor number 3, and we successfully got the program over the line. A little similar at HSBC, you know, in my 3 years there implementing the RPA COE, setting up the internal RPA capability, creating the digital workforce, and being responsible for really the delivery and implementation of that concern. You know, different leadership, our leadership changed quite frequently across those 3 years. And again, you have to be able to adapt to different styles, different remits, different viewpoints. There was different, you know, perceptions of how automation and RPA needed to look within the organization. And how I dealt with that, how do I deal with that? The tip I would give to you is when you're constantly having to adapt to a situation like that, you just need to keep asking questions. Ask what's expected of you. Ask what is going to be different. You know, ask away. Don't be afraid to do so. There's no such thing as a silly question. And to be able to adapt, you obviously have to be armed with information. Change is an ever-changing landscape. You have to adapt to it. It's often very ambiguous, and you have to adapt in relation to people, environments, and priorities. Before we move on from here, just one thing I will say, though, you have to stay true to your core vision of what you are trying to do. And you have to stay true to your ethics, your values, and your morals, and know when to adapt and when not to. And if you're struggling to understand whether you need to change and adapt or not, whether it's right or not to do so in a certain situation, use the tool of making holistic decision to help you reach where you need to follow that path. The next thing I just want to talk about is diplomacy. One thing that's really important when you're involved or delivering change is that you should not be evaluated on whether or not there is any conflict generated as a result of taking that change forward. There will always be conflict because you are doing something new and something very different to what was there before. Conflict will always come along for the ride when you're delivering change. A way to think about this: was there conflict when Martin Luther King was involved with civil rights all those years ago? Of course there was. Was there conflict when Emily Pankhurst led out the suffragette movement, winning women's right to the vote? Absolutely, of course there was. Were they wrong? Of course they were not. They pushed the envelope and they pushed us forward to where we need to be. You don't want too much, of course. If you can put any conflict fires out, obviously take all measures to do so. But when the inevitable happens, and it will happen, there will be conflict, be evaluated on how you manage that conflict. Do you run away? Do you throw your hands up in the air and say this is too hard? Do you bury your head in the sand? No, of course you don't. As a change leader or a party to a change project or a member of a team that's delivering change, you figure it out, taking all of the positions into account. There are 3 key responses that you will experience when you're delivering change. The rational, the person that's interested in the facts, wanting to know the data and making their conclusions based on that data. The emotional, people that just think about how the change makes them feel. And the political, those that consider how it impacts maybe their prestige, their influence, and their proximity to those they care about. And then the final discipline in this framework is persistence. I like the quote here, the definition, should I say, that I found. The fact of continuing to try to do something despite difficulties, especially when other people are against you and think that you are being annoying or unreasonable. Now, I love this. I love the word annoying in here. I'm often considered to be annoying when I'm trying to deliver change. It's been said many times. And it's actually okay to be a little bit annoying when you're delivering change. Sometimes you kind of have to be. But the reason persistence is the last discipline in this framework is because persistence in itself is not a virtue. People can be persistently wrong. And we know people that are persistently wrong, right? But if you've covered 1 to 5, if you've ensured that you have awareness and you've taken the information that you've gathered and made holistic decisions, clearly communicated those decisions to the stakeholders around you and those people that are impacted by the change, adapted throughout the journey to deliver that piece of change to people, environment, business problems, whatever they might be, and been diplomatic and balanced and measured when you've been managing conflict. You've pretty much earned the right at this stage to be persistent and stick to what you're trying to do. In RBS, I had a situation where in the onboarding program that I mentioned to you, that we were trying to create a situation where our customers, if they operated across two different divisions of the bank, say the commercial bank and the investment bank, that they wouldn't have to onboard twice, which was the process at the time. The relationship managers and the traders saw absolutely no benefit in doing this. They did not believe it was an issue for their customers. They were very, very reticent to make any change, and they were very protective of their siloed operating models. I had to achieve this. It was an outcome of the program. So what I did was basically get some data, do some analysis of exactly how long it was taking these customers to onboard twice. And despite the fact that we were being told it really was an issue, we established that it was taking it from 10 to 20 days for them to execute that second transaction. So basically, this is where your data and your analysis, as we talked about, your facts become really, really important to be able to convince a stakeholder to accept the change that you are being set out to deliver. And again, HSBC, let's talk about RPA again. You know, we were having to be persistent around the benefits of the digital workforce, persistent around, you know, the fact that we really should be looking to build out an internal capability to train up our own staff to be configurators, as we know is the vision for Blue Prism RPA. And both Brian, Lee Edwards of Smart Automation and myself had to be persistent in that messaging for a very long time to ensure that that vision and that strategy was achieved. People will dig their heels in when their opinions are challenged. It's human nature. The key to persistence is knowing when to push, when to sprint, and really importantly, when to back off. Each change effort has its own rhythm, and you need to be able to identify how to play that. So to close, as you look as individuals to how you can make positive change, whether that be in your workplace, your career, your home life, if you leverage these disciplines that I've shared with you today and improve upon them within yourself, you will not only help yourself achieve what you are capable of, but also your organisation, the Blue Prism organisation, your community around you, your country, and the world. You know, you really can contribute to make the world a better place. And there are things we need to do better in this world. And that has never been as important as it is today. Thank you for listening, everyone.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.